Welcome to Written and Read By, Episode 1, The Watch, by Nick LaMendola. There is a young woman named Malayah. She could be any young woman. She lives in a city that could be any city. She is one of many young women living in one of many cities, grinding her way through the crush of the urban landscape that doesn't care about her or anyone. One of many young women in many cities, in many worlds, carving out a home in an inhospitable place. She will come upon an opportunity, a technology whose promise to lift her off of the treadmill of her daily life will sound too good to be true. The watch is humanity's first time travel device, and Malayah is always on the lookout for a good con.
You best turn yourself into something they can't take away, they can't sell. Don't talk about it, be about it. Raekwon.
With the press of a button, you will be transported through time towards a moment of your choosing, later or much later, out of this life and into a new one. She remembers the wrinkle in his nose as he delivered the line to the group, the hint of his sneer as he ensnared them. The masterful presentation of his sales pitch would not have been necessary. The doctorate on his wall was hardly even necessary. He had created a product that would have drawn them to him if he'd revealed it on a street corner from beneath a trench coat. Familiar herself with the task of giving people what they wanted, she had enjoyed watching the finesse of his perfect delivery. Her grandfather had once explained to her why people are drawn to art.
Art, you see, that's just what we call anything made up in its best self.
She had understood his point and had appropriated it into her own motto. If you can't make it, then unmake it. The sun shines through the windows onto ants under a magnifying glass. It is hot on the bus, just as it is hot everywhere in the city and everywhere in the world. With a thin arm, she mats the fluff of her hair into a round bouquet that flops off of the back of her head like a halo. She feels the gaze of the man 2 rows back, tiptoeing across her exposed skin. She thinks about how people are defined by the defining ways they look, and wonders how soon that will start to bother her. The man can't help himself, and she doesn't mind. He wants her for the same tired reason white men have always wanted everything, because they've been told they are not allowed. He could have her the way he pictures her within the privacy of his mind. The images are plentiful and only as difficult to find as bits of hay in a haystack. When it came her time, she hired a photographer and uploaded the photos herself. Then she watched with hands that cupped warm water as her signal was lost in the noise of a commodity digitized and oversold until valueless. And then she didn't know how to feel. But she remembers now how her beauty makes her tactical. It makes her confident. It allows her to get what she wants without having to beg, like the rest of that sad bunch gathered in rows of folding chairs in that damp room. She checks her makeup in a pocket mirror and slides it back into her purse. She sits back, a shapely body in a faceless generation. She sits back, comfortably. She gives the man time to wonder at the whether or not of her underwear as she waits for her stop. And then she pulls the cord and stands up, slowly, a curve bent into a straight line. She lowers pointed toes with aimed purpose as she glides down the aisle towards the door. Outside, the air swelters. Sunlight tears through the atmosphere and dives into the shimmering asphalt. The pavement, a recharging battery, allies itself with the stifling exhalations of 1,000 window-mounted air conditioners. She turns her key in the front door of the high-rise, and as she climbs up the 7 flights, the sweat quivers and drips and collects in the divots of her low back. Her grandfather won't be home until 6. She is alone for a few hours. She slips out of her shoes and her skirt and flops onto the bed and opens her laptop. Alerts spill over and off the screen as she checks her email accounts. Her spam preferences aggregate rather than filter, and there are hundreds of messages that await. The majority of it is unoriginal and trashable, but, always on the hunt for new ideas, new patterns, she scans through each piece. This is her research. This is her industry's trade publication. Today, it gives her nothing. A chat window pops up on the screen.
How many profs you made?
23.
Shit, girl, not bad, not bad. I'm on 17 just today, 40 for the week. Mr. swinging below his knees. You know it, bae. You better catch up.
Their competitive streak. But it's still Tuesday. She doesn't know his real name, and she assumes he doesn't know hers either, but there have been hints dropped that they live in the same city. She is comforted by the chasm of the virtual between them, and he has never indicated that he feels differently. He might not even be a guy, but why spoil things by collapsing his endless possibilities into one diminished reality? Men who met her in person never really saw her anyways, not the way Ray did. He might beat her this week, he usually did. She won't mind his bragging when they post the numbers, his swagger is entertaining when it is playful. She decides not to mention the meeting this morning that kept her away from her computer. She'll work into the night to make up for it.
They don't pay you for speed, you gotta make them draw. I saw your shit from last week. That week shit gonna go redacted. It don't matter. This gig bout done. I heard the bot only need a few more days' data.
That stings. Rather than focusing on it, she ponders why, despite his disregard for every other rule of grammar, he attends dogmatically to the correct usage of apostrophes.
Fuck. You got any other jobs lined up? A few. Plenty of fishing in the sea. Wanna share? I DM you if I need help. Ray, don't fuck with me. I take care of you, bae. I always do. I'm out.
His screen name turns gray and he is gone, but he sticks with her. She's been in his wake since they met a few years ago. He'd gotten her the job, creating profiles on social media platforms to lure personal information out of strangers. They existed in a tiny bubble within the globular cluster of the internet's spiraling cash flow, paid once a week in virtual currency after submitting usernames and passwords for each cache of new user accounts. Imitable or transparent accounts were redacted and were subtracted from their totals. The monitors at the networks were accumulating their sensitivities to the odor of a forgery, so their work was deleted after 7 days to hide their scent. Popular and convincing work that led to an accepted friend request, a private message, a weaseling repossession of those invaluable 9 and 16-digit numbers, those were her strengths. Those were her personal bonuses. Ray is her mentor, and Ray is her rival. Their line of work is never steady, And even relatively high-paying gigs like this one don't go far after she hands over her half of the rent to her grandfather. She isn't a real hacker, and understanding only the basics of coding leaves her to do the internet's most menial labor, what is not yet, but is very soon to be, automated. She and Ray work for a company that is refining an algorithm that will create fake profiles on its own, and it needs thousands of examples of what makes an account look authentic enough for someone to connect with it. And now, after months of shoveling feed into its reclined jaw, the behemoth is prepared to swallow them alive. She stretches her long legs on the bed and buries her fingers in her dense curls. There is no money in porn, and she knows too many girls that turned to whoring who got beat up or pregnant. She needs Ray to teach her to code, but he has been distant lately. He knows that the less she can do for herself, the more useful she is to him. She runs her hand up the inside of her thigh. If things do have to get personal, she can make herself worth his time. She flips back onto her stomach and works on a few more profiles until she hears the bolt slide in the front door and the clomping footfalls of her grandfather's shoes. She listens through the hollow walls to the creaking under his heavy feet as he hangs up his hat and jacket, and then she hears a knock on her door.
Hey, Cricket, you in there?
He wheezes softly, not sure if she might be asleep.
Mm-hmm.
The handle whines and he walks in.
Good gracious, Malayah, what are you doing greeting your grandpa with your bare rear end?
He hides his face dramatically behind a raised forearm.
Wrap some clothes around yourself. Have some dignity. Good Lord, when I was your age...
And he continues to mutter to himself. She thinks she hears him mention the war, which he is inclined to do in situations that bear no relation to it.
It's not bare, Grandpa.
As she twists around and slides off the bed and stands up to face him. But he doesn't lower his arm, so she scoffs and slides into a pair of nylon shorts to hide her underwear.
You're the one who walked in on me. You decent child, may I now look upon you?
He drags it out overdramatically and makes her smile, and she wraps her arms around him.
How are you, Grandpa? How was work today? Work was work, baby. Work was work.
He pats her head.
One of these days, if you ever see fit to try it yourself, I might come home from a long day and we can commiserate. I told you, Grandpa, I have a job. I've been working all afternoon. Only God knows what that is.
With his peppery inflection as he unclips the name tag from his starched white shirt.
I keep telling you, you just don't listen when I explain it. I work online.
She has repeated that phrase many times and never follows it with any details. She assumes that working as a bellman in a hotel for 40 years has narrowed his imagination until the life in front of him is all the life he can conceive of. She becomes more and more right every day.
Listen, Cricket, you hungry? I'm gonna heat up some of your aunt's meatloaf. No, not right now. I have to finish some work up and then I'm gonna get in bed early.
Which, as is the case for most of the things she tells him, is nominally true.
Okay, honey, I won't eat it all. You just holler if you get peckish.
And he steps back and pulls her door shut. She hops back down onto her bed, and as she squints into the bright rectangle of her screen, she listens to him open a few cabinets, punch some buttons on the microwave, sink down into his chair, and turn on the TV. A negative brands itself into her retinas, and later she hears the volume cut off, a creaking of floorboards, the clatter of dishes in the sink, the sound of his door opening and closing. Later, when her eyes can no longer focus on the screen, she presses her thumbs into her eyelids. Ray hadn't logged back on, and she'd only created 6 profiles since she'd gotten home. Today had cost her, not in money, but in that more nebulous, seemingly inexhaustible currency. Today had cost her in time. She swallows 2 capsules, without which she is increasingly unable to turn herself off, and she shuts her young eyes. In her dreams, she is a statistic, a digit in a series of numbers, a page view in a bell curve. She has no identity. She has many identities. She has no privacy. She is everywhere, and everyone she knows is with her. In her life, she uses many aliases, but gives her personal information freely. She has nothing worth stealing, and everything to gain from a glance through the passenger side mirror at a good con. The next day is the same as all the others have been before it, and all the others will be after it. She wakes up when she wakes up, in an empty apartment. She rinses away the night's sweat. She takes something to help her concentrate. She opens her computer. When she gets twitchy, she pushes aside the soda cans and garbage on her desk and finds the pamphlet from yesterday. In unadorned text, it reads, "The Watch," and in smaller letters at the bottom of the page, "By Adaptive Neuroplastics, Inc." Its branding is the concise reimagining of the anachronism of a pocket watch. She remembers the saps, the nobodies who showed up to be taken advantage of by the swarthy doctor. She is a liar, but not unto herself. She will go back, either because she has something or nothing to lose. And after that, she works quickly. When she pauses to massage an aching wrist, she reviews 16 new personas, freshly minted. They begin as images. Wandering amid the dross and the digestive tract of a search engine, she finds them and crops their faces, isolates their torsos, brings in their hips, applies glisten to their muscles, erases their blemishes. Now on to the filling in of the details, the engendering. He, but much more often she, likes what you like. Her interests are nebulous, yet passionate. She is a list of movies, TV shows, video games, food, alcohol, sex. She is a person you want to be, and therefore a person you want to be with, and she is nothing more vehemently than the distinct possibility of sex. White guys fall for South American women. They wear flowing, translucent silks that expose a great deal of their tanned, exotic skin. White girls are trickier. They usually take more time and tender a lower return on investment, but an experimental Jose or Esteban from Portugal will occasionally draw from a few of the lonelier ones. The rapidly burgeoning demographic of older women, pinned in their twilight in front of a flickering screen, they want older men, widowers, someone with a lake house, 2 grown sons, a golden retriever. Black girls want black guys want white girls. They all want the attention of a person who was born in a place they've never been, but can imagine themselves visiting. She lures out of any and all of them their diversified and amalgamated data. Her children are beautiful. They are ephemeral. They reach out to you from every one of your social networks, on every one of your devices. Through every conduit into which you plug, they are there, until they are gone. The responses to this batch of her new offspring come almost instantly, but her schedule calls strictly for interest forged in the morning to grow into the afternoon before the night's harvest. Friend requests are, not too quickly, eventually accepted, pokes returned, winks reciprocated, slowly, not automatically. This amount of time is vital, for it is this pause that mass marketing promises us we will soon no longer have to endure, this inconvenient waiting around for a personal response eliminated by the instantaneousness of a machine. This is her flair, her elegance of craft, and in slow, agonizing, human time, relationships are kindled, promising connections fleetingly pursued, email accounts given out, phone numbers retrieved. Egos are fondled. Last week's seedlings, and all the ones before them, are left to wither. Ray might be faster, but he adds none of himself into his work. There is no artistry in it, no care. He works endlessly, only to make small numbers larger. The difference is that she likes the people she speaks with. They accompany her through the solitude of her days, and she savors the taste of the information she learns to suck from the tips of their fingers. She usually offers one of her real phone numbers and email addresses in her exchanges. She doesn't mind the hideous insults they throw at her when she abandons them, the promise to find out where she lives and the violence that will ensue. The identities she creates are gradients of her, and she is reckless with the exposure of herself, addicted to the realness of anonymity denuded. And it was like that. Wake, shower, swallow a pill, type, eat something, swallow a pill, fade into the fog of a dark room. Until one day.
Got the word. We done. What? We done, Legs. It's been real. Damn. When you here? Hour ago. They say this our last day. That bot got about all the data that motherfucker could eat. We packed it full. They don't need nothing else? Nada. Fuck. Alright. Thanks for the heads up. You got anything else in the pipeline? Not right now, bae. I get back with you. Working on it. Okay, hit me up. Peace.
She is halfway through typing,
Hey, listen, can we meet?
when his screen name goes gray. So she is cut off. The job is done, and she has no money that will last. She'd thought about doing this kind of work on her own, but the gluttonous trawling nets of the program she'd helped to create will quickly pull all of her fellow fishermen out of business. There is no future in the pursuit of someone else's goals. In time, she types a number into her phone and the line connects. She says that she'd been there last week, and she asks if there are any openings. The woman on the other end says that there are. Although she remembers clearly the answer, she asks if the program pays. It does, $200 per week for the duration of the 6-week clinical trial. She asks how quickly they can fit her in. I have an opening tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. Yes, she replies, that will work fine for her. $200 isn't much after rent, food, and 3 bus transfers to the suburban office, but she doesn't have many other options, and she knows that Ray will get back to her eventually. In the real world, there is no such thing as extra credit, so she turns in what she has already finished and rolls onto her back to stare into the cracking plaster pattern of her ceiling, today suddenly a floundering sea of possibility. She leaves the building before her grandfather gets home. She meets up with some friends and eats some pills, and soon the night rushes around her, a furious vibration of sweating and groping inside impossible volumes of sound pressure. When she looks up to find herself alone, her group scattered by the club's various carnivores and scavengers, it is only then that she finds someone to take with her. She wakes up the next day in a foreign room beside a layer of tousled sheets and feels her swollen brain pulse painfully against the walls of her skull. She steams in the stranger's shower and wraps herself up in the stranger's towels and peruses idly through an empty apartment before letting herself out into the daylight wearing last night's dirty clothes. She is late, and she gets on the bus. She gets off the bus. The sunlight is torrential, and perspiration oozes from her warmer, tighter places. Her hair is an untamable thicket in the humidity, and she tugs at her shirt to fan feeble puffs of hot air onto her chest and stomach. When she pulls open the glass door, a cascading coolness suffuses her, and she has to pause in a moment of deep environmental shock. The building is generic, like a rented encampment, like it serves different purposes on different days of the week. Its rooms are indistinctly rectangular, indistinctly beige, so immemorable that it feels designed to be forgotten. Because she can recall little of last night, she feels empowered by her already heightened ability to live only in a chosen present. Whether or not they can teach her anything, These people will not make or unmake her. The receptionist at the front desk greets her in a vacantly pleasant tone and types her name into a computer before leading her down a hallway into a small waiting room. Despite being told that the doctor will be in momentarily, she is handed a magazine. After most of an hour in the refrigeration, she is retrieved, not by the doctor, but by a woman wearing white. She follows the lab coat down a long and empty hallway packed tightly with numberless doors that flutter past her, defying count, defying her bearings. They walk, they turn abruptly, they walk. A stopping point is chosen at random, but with methodical purpose, the way a magician pulls a card from a deck. She is led into a small room with a monitor that sits on an otherwise empty desk, and she is asked to please sit down. The doctor will be with her shortly. The door clicks shut behind her, and the room glows in the dulled orange of ceiling lights that are controlled by no visible switches or dimmers. Without introduction, the screen pops to life and a video begins playing. It is quiet at first, implying but not commanding her attention, and there is a feeling in the room, perhaps piped in through the vents, the tacit reminder of her freedom to leave any time that immobilizes her. The camera revolves around a globe, panning out to reveal dozens of such blue marbles with limbs that reach out and spiral into squirming helixes. The watch is an escape. An absent narrator begins with the simmering tonality of a cloud of aerated incense. It is humanity's first time travel device. It is our opportunity to claim control over the speed of our journey into our future. On the screen, a pair of eyes open and reveal a nebula. The music stretches outward and rumbles. Sunlight bursts through a cloud onto a green field. The image washes out into an intense whiteness that makes her squint and lean backwards. The crescendo rears. The rush of an explosion empties from somewhere behind her. And the lights turn up, and the screen goes black. In a precisely choreographed moment, a man with a clipboard opens the door and introduces himself loudly, but not loudly enough to overcome her shell shock.
Jeff, I said. I'm Jeff. Jeff with a G. Hey there.
It all stammers out of him as he extends his hand.
How'd you like that video? Big time Hollywood special effects, huh? It was expensive, man. Was it expensive? But that's marketing. You gotta have good marketing.
The splatter of his speech caroms around the tiny room, crowding it in a nervous mist. She wonders how much the surgery of that half-minute of stock footage could possibly have cost them, and what had happened to the doctor with the slicked black hair from last week.
Okay, it says here that you are, Malayah, right?
He does pause, finally, out of what appears to be a legal necessity to establish an understanding of terms. She nods.
Great. Wow, that's a beautiful name, Malayah. Malayah. Is that Afra? Where are you from? I mean, well, big city. No one's from here. I get it.
He backs away from a line of questioning that might deviate from his script, his natural inquisitiveness restrained by a draconian schedule. Already his mania is exhausting her. It isn't merely caffeine that does this to a person. She wishes she'd stopped home and taken something of her own before coming, just to keep up with him.
I'm sorry, but who are you?
She asks, groggily.
Oh yeah, of course, I must have forgot. I'm Jeff with a G. I developed this treatment with Stuart Connor, MD. He did your seminar. He's got the degree. Well, not that I don't. I mean, I did the development. I handle the trials, the testing, the implementation. He just does the publicity.
He might have continued on like this for a while, bending into this hyperactively bad pitch, but nobody had told her what this thing did, and she tells him so.
None of y'all told me what this thing does. Oh, yeah. Wow. Remarkably intuitive. Malayah, exactly. Yeah. Yes. The information we disseminate to the public can be, vague. But we're doing some revolutionary, amazing stuff here in this lab. And I mean, if you only knew.
It's time to leave. She straightens up.
No. Wait, hold on.
He is breathless, and he is much too close to her face, and his sweaty palms wrap around her shoulders before she smacks them away.
Right, I'm sorry, I won't touch.
And then he decides to just dive into it.
Okay, so the watch is a device that takes advantage of advances in the field of neuroplasticity in order to, well, unstick you in time.
He takes one hell of a dramatic pause, tapping the pentagon of his stubby fingers together and frowning when she does not flush with amazement.
Yeah. Well, think of it as a way to skip through the parts of your day that you find the most mundane and repetitive. You hit a button and your brain skips all that for you. And the next thing you know, you look up and it's done.
You said, like, fast forwarding?
Well, no, I mean, I didn't, but that's a really good way of putting it. So are you would you like me to proceed?
As if he'd never gotten this far before.
You ain't even said what it is yet.
She defends against his insistent advances because she knows Ray would never let anyone feed him bullshit and then bite down on the hook. But this is such an unusual scam.
Oh, of course, yeah. Wow. Malayah, what a wonderful intellect. How remarkably astute you are. Well, the device is a watch, of course, a wristwatch, and it pairs to these conductors that we slide under the skin at your temples. But don't worry, because you can't even see them when they're in there, and it doesn't hurt. It's basically painless.
This is a pelting of bad ideas. The barrage is throwing up too many red flags to count, and their collective whip as they soar through the air fans her with a warm breeze. This is a tanker truck stalled at a railroad crossing with a foghorn bellowing collisions approach. She can't turn away.
So this thing lets me skip any part in my day I don't want to sit through?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. It's magic. It's science. But I do have to tell you that I wrote a mechanism into the code that prevents you from skipping more than 24 hours in one 7-day period. A day in a week. Won't be permanent, probably, once we know more about the watch's effects on the brain.
He is barely brushing against his checklist of things to mention while he whisks one of his day's many clients deeper into this proposition than he'd expected to get. Her own job has taught her the struggle to balance quality with quantity.
Is this like approved by the FDA or whatever?
Yeah, of course, for sure. We're in the middle of the approval process. You're actually helping us with that. But man, think of it. Just being able to skip anything you can't stand to sit through. Traffic, bam. A meeting at work, bam. Cleaning the laundry, bam. You just set up your watch and skip it all, and you wake up just like from a nap.
She thought about a concept that appealed so broadly that it was surprising that they had taken even this much time with her. She thought about what appalling percentage of the truth she was being told. She thought about asking for a job application.
Do I remember what I skipped?
Of course, absolutely. You remember everything in full detail after a short period of recovery that we're working to minimize. So, what do you, say? Are you interested?
She would become a prop, a data kernel, a living variable, an input prepared into an output. A purpose with measurable worth.
And you pay me $200 a week to wear this thing, right?
She figures there's no way this thing's gonna work. Not if this guy invented it.
Yeah, baby. In cold hard cash, twice a month. Oh, and of course there is a signing bonus, a check. $500 if we put it in today.
She hadn't been told about a signing bonus. This, she guesses, is the big reveal. She is sickened to watch him react to the change in her body language as the topic of money is brought up.
Oh man, so are you ready for my big reveal?
Wringing his hands, swelling with anticipation. She doesn't know what to say, but it won't matter.
I've got one. It's in me. Turn on, right now.
He raises his arm and shows her the gray band on his wrist.
Give me 90 seconds and specific nodule of my temporal cortex will get zapped, and I'll regain a stream of thought that I began 13.5 minutes ago.
He spreads his lips into a beaming grimace, a teetering child behind a display table at a science fair. She considers asking him another 1.5 minutes worth of questions, but she doesn't see the point. Time to end this charade and collect her pay.
Okay, I'll try it.
Whoa, hell yeah!
Jeff with a G exclaims. His typical clientele aren't the type of people with the resources to turn down money for nothing, but still, his exuberance is disconcerting. He hands her a few papers to review and sign, and then whirls out of the room. She will never see him again. The rest happens quickly. The woman from earlier comes back and scans the papers for the proper signatures before leading her deeper into the building, where she is asked to lie down on a padded table beneath 2 imposing mechanical tentacles. A voice speaks to her from the ceiling.
Please lie down on your back and pull your hair away from your temples.
The voice is chewing gum. She begins, suddenly nervous.
Is this gonna hurt?
No more than getting a tattoo, ma'am, but we do need to strap you down for safety.
She climbs reluctantly up onto the table, and the woman guides a jacket of mesh straps over her head and torso. The lights dim. The machine growls and comes to life. The woman takes the clipboard and shuts the door behind her.
Try and relax, this will be over in a few seconds.
Conveying the boredom of repetition found in a teenager behind the controls of a tilt-a-whirl. With a decisive hydraulic force, the straps pull her down into a suffocating paralysis. The lights go out entirely. The whirring of a dental motor clicks on, and she feels the sting of 2 pinpricks and the slimy pressure of a foreign presence injected into her body. But then the lights turn back on, and she opens her eyes and sees the machine hovering over her, still and silent and gleaming as if it had never moved. The straps release with a hiss, and the voice comes back on the intercom.
Very good, ma'am. The procedure's finished. You may pick up your check and your pre-configured control module at the front desk.
She steps off of the table onto pillowy legs and reaches for her temples, feeling the bulge of 2 tiny circular discs and the remarkable absence of a fresh wound or sticky blood. The lab coat leads her, this time by the hand, out of the room and through the labyrinth, dropping her off at the front desk like a child. "This is Malayah. She's all finished with the procedure," spoken with pride to her counterpart behind a computer. "Welcome, Malayah, and congratulations." Equally full of inculation, the rebound of her response could have proven the 2 sisters. "I remember my procedure. It was a little scary, but believe me, the darkness helps. You're better off not watching what that machine does. I remember wishing I could have pressed a button and skipped the whole thing." And she laughs for a few breaths at the joke that she will tell to another 12 people that day. "Here is your watch. It has already been pre-programmed for you, as Marcus mentioned. It's even easier to work than a smartphone. You set it with this dial, and you press and hold this button to activate the shift in your consciousness, and off you go. And of course, if you don't touch it for 3 seconds, it shows you the time, or why would we call it a watch?" She laughs again and says goodbye, and she shoos her patient back out into the hot sun. The whole thing had taken less than 2 hours. It had felt impressively regimented, organized like a busy train station or a slaughterhouse. Despite the sense that she was only one of many patients in the building that day, she had seen no one other than the 3 staff members all afternoon. She walks back to the bus stop, glancing down at the thing they had fastened to her wrist, impressed by the miniaturization of a device that had been made to control her mind. It is an ugly accessory, a gray and plastic and corporate-looking prototype, and yet it is her own. She thinks on the bus ride home about pressing the button, and tiny hairs rise on the backs of her arms despite the heat. It's BS, right? There's no way it's going to work. She looks back out the window, cradling it in her hands. She makes it home and walks up the many flights and peels off her skirt and flops down onto her bed and turns the smooth face around in her fingers. She speaks to it, tells it that its entrance into her life frightens her, and it responds by explaining that the feeling is mutual. She decides to skip the next 5 minutes. She sets the dial and breathes deeply before pressing the button to initiate the sequence. Nothing happens. She presses the button again, hoping to hear it beep or feel it vibrate or emit any reassurance that it has done its job. Again, nothing happens. Of course, nothing happens. What they were talking about was science fiction. Her day deflates as it returns to normal. She begins to shop, searching for a reason to spend her unexpected bonus when, like a lurching detoxification, a wave of herself spreads over her, thinned with a knife like a buttery vomit across her crust. It twists and unfurls herself in front of her as she watches and remembers sitting with bare legs crossed on crumpled sheets for 10 absent minutes. She looks unsteadily up at the clock in the corner of her screen. Seeing proof of the time that has passed, her elation will not be diminished, and already the disorienting pull of addiction reaches for her. She wants to look back at the buoys of her past that she will navigate towards, that she will have already navigated around. She presses the button again and she is in the kitchen, pulling a jug of milk from the refrigerator. She feels a distant vibration and then a cascade of thoughts as her brain makes room to receive the influx of memories it has put off, of standing up, of walking out of her room, of the texture of the worn laminate handle of the fridge door. She is nauseous. She is hungry. She sets the watch for 2 hours and looks down to see that she has changed her clothes, that she is standing in front of the sink, scrubbing the dishes from dinner, and that her grandfather has already sunken into his chair in front of the TV. She feels the curl of her spine and the pinch of her flesh as it clots into goosebumps. Her gut heaves with the forced entry of an entire meal all at once. Her hands burn in the suddenly scalding soapy water. She feels supplanted and violently ill. She rushes to the bathroom as her brain rejects the food that has been sitting calmly in her stomach since it was put there during dinner a lifetime ago. She feels a static discharge beside her eyes, and her vision flickers like the fizzy cathode of a dying bulb. She cannot fight the tempest of this sickness, and she sets the watch forward half an hour and feels a warmth spread across her, and then the dampness of a humid, sweaty blanket. She throws off the covers and gasps for air in her stifling bedroom. She tears at her clothes as the vision rolls over her. Her slithering crawl from the bathroom back into bed, shouting at her grandfather to leave her alone, the slamming of her door and the burying of herself into the folds of the sheets. It leaves her feeling hollow to an extent that no narcotic escaping her system has ever approached, alone in this new way, trapped by her present, locked out of her past. Her grandfather has turned off the TV. He may be asleep. He may be gone. She opens her computer, but Ray hasn't logged on. She should have his phone number, but she doesn't. She finds the website and calls the 800 number on the screen, but a friendly voice explains that Adaptive Neuroplastics is closed for the evening. She shivers, cold and febrile in the hot room, and finds the pamphlet that she buried under the refuse of her desk before any of this started. She tears off the stapled business card and reads the name and email address of Dr. Stuart Connor. She emails him because it is the only thing she can do, and receives an auto-reply that he is out of the country with limited internet access, but will respond when he is able to. She cannot wait. This daughter of the age of immediate gratification, she cannot slow her expectations or ration her patience. She skips another half hour, refreshes her browser, sees nothing, and presses the button again before she is borne along the sickening tide of reclamation that bears down on her. Still nothing. She looks at the watch and cycles through its menu, finding a screen labeled Time Remaining, which reads 21:15. She feels the faint ooze of an intractable past and siphons herself from it, pressing the button again, refreshing her browser again, feeling the pulse of her heart beating in her esophagus. When she sees nothing, she continues to advance her life incrementally, bypassing the symptoms of her realignment, finding a loophole, realizing that if she keeps pressing the button, she will eventually fast forward into. She opens her eyes to the brightness of the sun streaming through her blinds. She feels heavy, ductile, hammered out into a thin strip, like she doesn't know what month it is. She pulls her computer onto her lap and opens it and sees 3 things. It is 11:45 a.m. 14 hours have passed since she last saw the digits of a clock. The message that she is waiting for sits among dozens unread in her inbox. Prepared for the onslaught of the waking sickness, she reads Dr. Connor's response.
Malayah, I understand that the side effects of this device can be unpleasant. I have felt them as much as anyone during the development of this technology. Don't overdo it. There is a point at which your brain can reject the therapy, but we feel it to be well over the 24-hour per week limitation we have put on your controller. Use the device sparingly and your mind will learn to cope with its restructuring. But remember, you are fracturing and stitching yourself back together. After you use the watch, you will need time to adjust, to heal. This is not a time machine. It is a therapy. Please summarize your findings in your weekly report and submit them to Jeff via your account profile. Dr. C.
The illness reaches out to her, and she fights it, but it defeats her. She heaves, but she is empty. She twists and sweats and sits down to wait in sleep's churning vestibule. And then there she is again. Her breath whistles through narrowed cavities and into sore lungs. She unhooks the buckle and throws the watch across the room as tears collect along the lower edges of her eyelids. She scratches at the lumps beneath her temples, feeling caged inside her body. But she must control herself. She must make herself into the person she needs to be. Or, if you can't make it, unmake it. She gets dressed and picks the watch up off the floor and grabs her Metro card and leaves the empty apartment. She cashes the $500 check on her way to the bus stop. The loss of the stipend will be painful, but she'll find some other way to scrape together the money to survive. She sits in her seat on the stuffy bus, wishing she could skip the next few hours. She reaches into her purse for the watch and raises it in front of her face, inspecting it like the photograph of an abusive ex-lover. It speaks to her, calmly, charmingly, reassuringly, highlighting their triumphs together, whitewashing their struggles along the way. She sets the timer for long enough that this entire day will be long over with, touching past the warning that this command will use up her entire allotted time for the week. She wonders if this will skip her into tomorrow, or if she'll come to the moment they remove the device from her head. She presses the button, and an expanse descends upon her, deeper and more chaotic than before. She can feel the sparking of the overvoltaged conductors struggling to send such a large message to her brain. She can feel the heat. She can feel her muscles tense. And then she can feel the press of a hand into her hip. It is a tiny hand. It is the hand of a child. It precedes the child's voice. It asks her, "Mommy, when you gonna wake up?" It is Sierra's voice. Sierra's voice as she has known it for years now, and she feels the pillar of that fact sunken deep into the pit of her foundation. Sierra tugs on her arm, insistent that she wake up, that they miss the bus, that she has to take her and Marshall to school. Her eyes open and she is on her bed. She feels the emptiness next to her and knows that he is still gone, that he is not coming back. It takes her a while to remember why he left, but of course, there are too many reasons to list. She hears Marshall flush the toilet. She tells Sierra to go outside and wait with her brother while Mommy gets dressed. And Sierra tells her that Marshall told her that he wasn't her brother because they have different daddies. She tells her daughter that this is nonsense and that doesn't mean they aren't brother and sister. Sierra asks when Tarek is coming back, and when she hears his name, she feels it all begin to unravel into loose twine. She tells Sierra to go wait in the hallway while Mommy gets dressed. And she waits until she hears a tiny hand twist a creaky doorknob, and then she swings her feet off of the mattress and onto the floor, and she feels the rising turbulence in her. Its remuneration is distant. It is familiar. It demands payback on her loan. It bellows at her as it sucks her down into the heart of herself, of the herself that she was a long time ago. Just before the blackness, she feels the tweak of an undead habit lift her fingers to her temples, and she tries to remember when it was that she started doing that.
This has been written and read by Episode 1, The Watch, by Nick LaMendola. Thanks so much for listening. This episode was brought to you by Woody.